drawing students, this is a demo on the Viewfinder and drawing some focal point studies. So hopefully you've watched the how to build a Viewfinder short little video, and then the result of that is going to be this little guy, and you're going to need this. This is your Viewfinder. What this is a compositional tool that we're going to use much like we use our sighting stick, but this helps to crop in our view so that we can zoom in and out and use this to help draw our composition. What this essentially is a viewfinder into your picture plane. Remember that picture plane is that imaginary glass plane between you and the thing that you're drawing. And so this lies on that picture plane and helps you translate that three-dimensional to the two-dimensional. So we'll be looking through these to do some focal point studies and zooming in to do that. You'll also need everything else that you've needed before as well, your 18 by 24 paper, your graphite pencils. We will be using those for this, and then also your sighting stick. You will need that. And also, just to start the drawing off, you'll need your yardstick again. And the reason for that is because you're going to want to draw two rectangles on either side of your drawing. You can see how I've done that here, and I did a little time lapse of that for you so you can see how I did that. But I measured essentially actually 10.5 inches by 14 inches, and I left 3 inches up here at the top because we're going to do some thumbnail sketches up here. Then we're going to choose one of those thumbnails and we're going to blow it up twice. So that's what we're going to be doing. So you need some more space at the top here, and you need, again, 14 inches by 10.5, essentially 11 by 14 is what you're wanting. And you want a rectangular composition, and you want it there twice because we're going to draw that same composition twice. All right, and then also you can see over here on my right, your left, no, I don't know, is a quite a lot going on in this still life here. I have 3 different levels, and I have drapery on the whole thing, and that kind of helps tie everything together. And I know that no matter where I zoom in, I'm going to have a lot of nice detail going on. But notice all the different textures again that I have: the glass, the various vegetables that I just grabbed out of the pantry, a metal thing that's going to give some shiny texture. Found some film canisters and also metal. And so soft, glass, opaque, bumpy texture things, shiny things. So I have a plethora of things that I can zoom in, and I can choose what composition I want to draw. First, you need to know how to use this viewfinder. So how to use the viewfinder. Like I had said, this is going to be our tool to zoom out and in, right? So you can see how when we hold this up against our eyes, that the farther away we hold it, the more zoomed in we are to the composition. If you imagine the edges of the viewfinder being the edges of your picture plane, the edges of your drawing, the farther away we hold it, the more zoomed in we are. Literally what we are doing is we are zooming in. But the closer we hold it to our eyes, the more zoomed out we are, and the more of the composition we can see. Now, the tendency when you're drawing these focal point study drawings is going to be to zoom way out, almost to where the viewfinder is non-existent. And you don't want to do that. You want to zoom in, and we want 3 different textures in our drawings, but something around this, about this zoomed in, or even more, is going to be good for you. So I'll just kind of scan back and forth so you can see what that looks like. Again, the farther away we hold it, the more zoomed in we are. And the closer to our eyes we hold it, the more zoomed out we are, and the more of the composition we can see. So that's a little play that this thing does. Now, the way that we use this, again, like I said, very similar to how we use the sighting stick, that we're going to hold this in our non-dominant hand. I'm right-handed, so I'm going to hold this in my left hand. And I don't necessarily have to lock my elbow for this, remember, because I'm zooming in and out. But what I do need to do is when I do decide on somewhere that I want this to be, I need to somehow lock my arm where that is and try not to zoom in or out much after I've decided on an area. So the first thing we're going to do is to draw some thumbnails. Notice how quickly I do these. I don't spend a lot of time on them. The tendency is to spend a lot of time on your thumbnails, and sometimes that's necessary, but for this drawing, it's not. You're really just doing compositional studies, so you really don't need to spend more than 30 seconds on these thumbnails, and you should do at least 4 of them. I encourage you to do more. And you're going to do at least two horizontal studies and 2 vertical studies. So what I'm doing is I'm holding this in my non-dominant hand. I'm squinting my right eye. Remember, we're squinting one eye. So I'm going to squint my right eye, look through this so that I can, and you'll notice if you try and look through it with both eyes, you get kind of double vision. So you really do have to squint one of your eyes. All right, so I found somewhere that I think is kind of interesting. So I'm going to do one of my first thumbnails, and it's going to be this little square right here. I'm looking at the edges of my viewfinder when I am drawing this study. So what I'm looking at and looking for is where are things intersecting the edges of my viewfinder? Where are lines intersecting the edges of my viewfinder? Well, I have this fold that goes through right here. I have another fold that comes over like this, but I'm looking at the edges of my fold come out at about this part of the viewfinder and go out on this part of the viewfinder. So this is helping me flatten out my 3-dimensional thing already. I have a film canister that's about right here. And then I have a fold that comes through like this. I have more film canisters up top here. And this is about all that I need for this thumbnail. So I've decided that this is my composition. Really quick, putting in this information to give myself an idea of what's going on. And that is it. That's all I need for my thumbnail. So to kind of show you exactly what I was doing was I was zoomed way in like this. And that was the composition that I drew. And what I looked at was how this line of this fold comes in at the composition right here. It exits over here. I have my film canister right here. And then I have these 3 right here, and I was a little bit more zoomed in like that. And they were going out from the composition. So that is essentially how you're doing this. So you're zooming in, you're choosing on one area, looking at all the different shapes and how they enter and exit the viewfinder, and using these edges to help you do that. And then you're moving to another one and doing another study. And I think maybe right here is where my next study will be. So let's see here. I'm going to do another horizontal one right about here. I don't know. Let's see. And yeah, let me try that. Okay, so here's my next little rectangle. Just really quickly drawing that. You can, if you want, measure that out, but it needs to be the same relative proportion as this, as your big drawing. Okay, so there's my little rectangle, my horizontal rectangle, and then I have my lock that's right about here. I have a fold that's coming in like this and exiting this way. And I have an onion right here. And it's got a little knot right here. The lock's got a little lock. And then this is the opening for that. And that's about it, really. There's not a lot going on in there. So see how quick and how simple this is. Really just very quickly doing these studies. I'm going to do 2 vertical ones. I'll decide on one of these, and then again we're going to draw this blown up twice. We're going to use the thumbnail to blow this up, and you're still going to use your viewfinder. Okay, so I've done 4 studies, and I recommend you do as many as you want. You can do several more. You want to do several horizontal and vertical, so again, at least 2 horizontal and at least 2 vertical. Now, I have decided on a composition that I like and that I want to blow up. When you make this decision, it needs to be something that you know that you're going to want to draw for a long period of time, because you're going to draw it twice. So make sure it's going to be something that you really want to draw. So I found something that I think is going to be pretty interesting. The other thing too that you need to think about is that you're going to be drawing this composition twice, and for each one, you're going to have a different focal point. So you need to have 2 different areas that can be a fully rendered focal point. So you need 2 different areas that are going to have a lot of high contrast. Now for me, I chose this composition with the lock and the onion, and I know that I can have 2 nice focal points there, one on the onion and one on the lock. And I think both of those are going to make a really nice rendering. Here we go. Now that I decided on that, this is my one that I decided on, and I'll put a little star next to it. This is a horizontal composition. So my rectangles that I made need to be horizontal. So I'm going to flip my paper like this, and now my thumbnail is the opposite direction, so I'm going to need to maybe draw it again, but draw it down here so that it's flipped. I might just do that just for myself. I will say that in the past, when students have done this, they find it easier to draw one and then draw the next one copying this one, and you can totally do that. That's perfectly fine. However that works best for you, I have no qualms about that. You don't need to necessarily cite both of them or draw them both from life. You did one, you can copy that one. But it's best for you to draw the focal point, the rendered focal point from life. You're gonna learn way more that way. Now, just for kicks, I am gonna draw this one more time, and I think actually this second time that I do it, I'm gonna get a better idea of my composition. I think I'm gonna zoom out just a little bit more. So yeah, that's going to be my composition. So things to think about for composition are that your eye is moving all over the composition. Maybe you have some nice diagonals moving through. Your eyes are moving in a diagonal way. That makes for more of an interesting thing to look at as well. But you don't want anything where your eyes are moving out of the composition. That's the main goal, is that the viewer's eye is staying in the composition as long as possible. Very important that your viewfinder is the same ratio as your composition that you're drawing on your paper. All right, so I have my thumbnail here that I've chosen, and I'm going to blow it up here on this bigger rectangle here, this bigger composition. Then what we're going to do eventually is we're going to choose a focal point. I know mine's focal point's probably going to be here, and my other focal point's going to be about here. And those focal points are going to be fully rendered, and the rest of the composition is going to be a line variation drawing, combining all the things that we've learned. And here I go. Okay, so I'm gonna call it quits for this demo. Now, as you can see, I've just started the plan for this bottom one, but eventually what would happen is I would clean this up quite a bit, just like I did up here, and I would choose another location for full value. So I brought this area to full value right here, and this could be bumped up quite a bit, you know, in the line weight as well. Down here, I'll probably bring this area to full value and the rest of this to line weight. So that's the idea, is that we have two different locations for full value to kind of contrast between the two. That was, we drew the two rectangles on the paper we had a 1-inch border all the way around. These are 10.5-inch by 14-inch rectangles here. Drew a nice border there. If you're afraid that you might smudge, you can tape the edges here. If you are bringing like a corner, you know, like a corner area to full value, then you would probably want to tape off the corners so you can know that you would have a clean edge. And then we did several different thumbnail sketches, moving the viewfinder around and deciding on different compositions to try. Tried a couple horizontal and a couple vertical ones. I decided on a horizontal one, so then I had to flip my paper to do 2 horizontal drawings here. Still holding the viewfinder. I had to hold the viewfinder for quite a while like this. Just had to hold it here, you know, and your arm gets really tired. But what you're doing with the viewfinder is that you're constantly comparing the area that the object takes up compared to the rectangle. You might have seen before some viewfinders that have like a grid in the middle of it. You can buy them that way, or if you want, you can actually like make marks on your viewfinder like that. Like you can divide it up in thirds on the edges like that. Maybe that will help you. I never did that myself, but that might be able to help you, especially the first time using something like this, is to compare how, as you're using the viewfinder, compare how objects are placed inside of that rectangle. So when I was placing the lock, I was looking at how big it was and in comparison to the rectangle, and in like what kind of quadrant it was located in. And I was looking at it that the inside edge of the lock was about in the very middle of the rectangle. So that helped me plan out whereabouts the middle of the lock was going to be. And I also was looking at just about how big it was compared to the rest. And then when I was placing the onions here, so whenever you're placing the rest of your objects, you're going to look and see in what kind of quadrant is it located and about how big it is. And that's where maybe the edges, like marking the edges of a viewfinder, might help. And then when it comes to like folds and things like that, I'm looking at how is it entering and exiting? How are these lines coming in and out of the composition? And then of course our goal too is to have 2 exact same drawings, so exact same compositions. That took me a while to do. You can see in the video how I built up the value. I didn't just go in with a really dark pencil. I started out the value with a light pencil, and again, that's that rendering. That's starting out with H pencils and building up on top of that. So I started with an H, then an HB, then B, then 2B, and then 4B, 5B, and then I went to a 7B selectively for some of these really darker areas. So that is how we want to do that rendering. So don't forget that. You don't want to just jump in with a really dark pencil. We want to have a nice rendered look there. And then for the rest of the composition, bringing line weight to it, and this could definitely be bumped up quite a bit. It's easiest too if you are working with an easel. Sometimes it's really easy to do line weight, especially at the end, is to take this actually off the easel and actually draw on it almost at just like this, you know. If you are using an easel, it's easier to do line weight down below like this, so you can kind of rest your hand a little bit better. But too, also another little trick too that I didn't actually use in this demo, but if you find that you're really smudging the graphite quite a bit, you can kind of rest your hand on a siding stick, or if you have even a thicker stick or something, that's a thing to do. That's a really nice technique to get used to when doing highly rendered things, so that your hand doesn't smudge the drawing. You saw how I planned out the top and then I planned out the bottom one. I was actually working both of these at the same time, and it was because for the planning stage, it was because I really wanted to make sure that these really actually did look the same. You saw me work back and forth in the planning stage between these two, and then I honed in on this one. So that's the goal, is that we want these to look the same, and then choosing two different focal points. So I chose this here, and then I would have chosen this over here. And then using what we know of line weight, line variation, line sensitivity, all of that, and bringing that to the rest of the composition, so we're not leaving any part of the composition not dealt with. All right, well, I'm really excited about the ones that you guys are gonna do. I'll finish the rest of this video up with some examples, some more examples of people who did this assignment, but they did 4 different drawings of the same composition. Still very good examples too. All right, and have fun, guys. Good luck.